On the first Sunday of Advent, we celebrated God's gift of hope through Christ.
On the second Sunday of Advent, we lit the candle of peace, recalling Jesus' teachings about peace, and that he is the Prince of Peace.
Today, we light the candle of joy.
Psalm 30, verse 5 reassures us. Weeping may linger for the night, but joy comes in the morning.
Not even death could contain the life and light of Christ. The weeping of Good Friday evening became the joy of Easter morning.
Christ our life, Christ our light, Christ our joy.
So today we're on the third Sunday theme, which is joy. Such a small word. So many aspects to consider. Today we're going to think about joy and its relationship to happiness. Are they the same? Are they different? Joy and gratitude. Joy and sorrow. It's opposite, or are they opposites?
Ooh.
What is their relationship? So we begin with kind of a biblical review of the word joy, both in the Hebrew Bible and New Testament. That's our first video.
Being in a good mood is really great, and most languages have lots of words to describe the experience, like happy, cheerful, joyful, and so on. The same goes for the languages of the Bible. In ancient biblical Hebrew, there's a variety of words, like simcha, sason, or gil. In the Greek New Testament, there's kara, euphersune, or agaliasis. Each word has its own unique nuance, but they all basically refer to the feeling of joy and happiness. Now, what makes these biblical joy words interesting is noticing the kinds of things that bring happiness, and also seeing how joy is a key theme that runs through the whole story of the Bible. Let's start with sources of joy. On page 1 of the Bible, God says that this world is very good. And so naturally, people find joy in beautiful and good things of life, like growing flocks or an abundant harvest on the hills. The poet of Psalm 104 says, "A good bottle of wine is God's gift to bring joy to people's hearts." People find joy at a wedding or in their children. There's even a Hebrew proverb that compares the joy that perfume brings to your nose with the joy a good friend brings to your heart. However, human history isn't just a joy fest. The biblical story shows how we live in a world that's been corrupted by our own selfishness. It's marked by death and loss. And this is where biblical faith offers a unique perspective on joy. It's an attitude God's people adopt, not because of happy circumstances, but because of their hope in God's love and promise. So when the Israelites were suffering from slavery in Egypt, God raised up Moses to lead them into freedom. And the first thing the Israelites did was sing for joy. Even though they were in the middle of a desert, they were vulnerable, the promised land was still far away, they rejoiced anyway. Later biblical poets looked back on this story and they remembered how the Lord caused his people to leave with joy, his chosen ones with shouts of joy. This joy in the wilderness, this was a defining moment, a way of saying that the joy of God's people is not determined by their struggles, but by their future destiny. This theme appears later in Israel's story, when Israel suffered under the oppression of foreign empires. The prophet Isaiah looked for a day when God would raise up a new deliverer like Moses. That's when those redeemed by the Lord will return to Zion with glad shouts, with eternal joy crowning their heads. Happiness and joy will overtake them. And while the Israelites waited, they chose joy to anticipate their future redemption. This is why it's significant that when Jesus of Nazareth was born, it was announced as good news that brings great joy. We're told that Jesus himself rejoiced and gave thanks to God his Father when he began to announce the kingdom of God. He even taught his followers the same joy in the wilderness, saying, when people reject you or persecute you for following me, rejoice, be very glad, because your reward is great in heaven. After his death and resurrection, Jesus commissioned his followers to go out and announce the good news that he was the risen King of the world. And as they did so, the early Christian communities were known for being full of joy, even when they were persecuted. Like when the Apostle Paul was sitting in a dirty Roman prison, he could say that he's chosen joy, even if he gets executed. He called this the joy of faith, or joy in the Lord. He believed it was the gift of God's Spirit, a sign that Jesus' presence is with you, inspiring hope in the midst of hardship. And when you believe that Jesus' love has overcome death itself, joy becomes reasonable in the darkest of circumstances. Now, this doesn't mean that you ignore or suppress your sorrow. That's not healthy or necessary. Paul often expressed his grief about missing loved ones or losing friends or his own freedom. He called it being full of sorrow and yet rejoicing. As he acknowledged his pain, he also made a choice to trust Jesus that his loss wouldn't be the final word. This is very different from the trite advice to turn that frown upside down. Christian joy is a profound decision of faith and hope in the power of Jesus' own life and love. And that's what biblical joy is all about.
A hand for Annie Kay or?
Yes. Thanks for watching this word study video by the Bible Collections. We make lots of other videos, and they're all about showing how the Bible is a unified story.
Go back in there and
You can go to our website, BibleProjects.com, see what we're working on, and even jump in and pitch in a few bucks to the next one. Thanks for being a part of this with us. Thank you again.
yeah, you just need to get back to there and I think you're good.
This is probably by
There's a commercial.
The joy.
Yeah,
There's a joy to be had in that.
And minimize it on the far right lower corner. That one, exit full screen. Yep, and then go back to Zoom. Good. And we don't need to screen share right now. Good, right?
Hey,
Hey!
Figured it out.
We learn, we grow.
With the-
Someone has a hand up?
Oh, maybe I thought it was on you, but
No?
it was just the cursor, sorry.
Oh, okay. Right. So actually that video, which is a couple of videographers' efforts to cover very quickly where joy is found in the Bible. What's the perspective there generally? Does joy, especially the relationship of joy and sorrow or difficult circumstances? What's the perspective, at least of the video, if not the Bible?
It's to be joyful in expectation as opposed to joyful because of some immediate circumstance.
Yeah. And what's the relationship between joy and sorrow then, as portrayed in this video and perhaps in the Bible?
It's embraced with hope.
Yes? What about the sorrow?
Sorrow can be imposed on you by your circumstances, but joy is your choice to look at the world through a joyful perspective. Yeah, exactly. He said, through my sorrow, I'm rejoicing.
Right. So it's kind of despite sorrow.
Yeah.
And perhaps because of sorrow.
how do you get that?
How do we get that? So the example is again, Paul in prison. Things look hopeless, and yet he's joyful. So he's able to be joyful in the midst of tragedy, sorrow, oppression, pain, exclusion, etc.
Security.
I'm sorry, I can't.
There's an element of security in joy that you have faith in what you depend on, that you hang in through the immediate circumstance.
So the other example was the Israelites in the desert. So they're in slavery, they're in bondage, they're freed from bondage, but are they really free yet? You know the story, Charlton Heston and all that? What happens after their freedom? Are they out of the woods?
40 years of
Right. They're not at all out of the woods. And yet, what isn't covered here, something I remember from seminary, unless my professors were fibbing or inaccurate, or I don't remember correctly. One of the oldest snippets of the Hebrew Bible that scholars believe actually made it into the Bible, like an pre-existing liturgical piece, or maybe it was written down. It's called the Song of Miriam. Who is Miriam? Do you happen to remember?
She's married.
Well, Miriam is later a name for Mary. The Song of Miriam in the Hebrew Bible in Exodus 15. Miriam is Moses and Aaron's sister.
Right. Wow.
And the scholars, as I recall from seminary, scholars say that the Song of Miriam, that is sung immediately after the Exodus, is perhaps the oldest part of the Hebrew Bible. It's just one verse. It was referenced very quickly in this video. That when the point is, when the Israelites are free of bondage, they're not really free yet. They've got a long way to go. They're not a nation yet. They're not in the land of milk and honey yet. And for all they know, maybe Pharaoh's going to continue chasing them, right? And still they sing. So this is the Song of Miriam in Exodus 15:21. Sing to the Lord who is highly exalted. Both horse and driver, God has hurled into the sea. This is the Song of Miriam. It's said to be even older than the much longer Song of Moses, which precedes the Song of Miriam. The point of the video is the Bible is full of these occasions of joy breaking out in the midst of calamity.
Does that mean that joy is actually our natural state?
It may be. And that's also implied in the video in Genesis 1. God said, it's good. It's good. It's good. It's good. Behold, at the end of Genesis 1, behold, it is very good.
I always saw joy as sort of a moment in time, right? Whereas happiness was sort of a state of being. New interpretation.
This is so interesting because that's our next two videos. We're going to talk about this relationship between joy and happiness. For some people, happiness is the more enduring experience. Joy is in the moment. Other people just reverse those and say happiness is the fleeting sort of, I got what I wanted now. And then tomorrow you say, what have you done for me later? And joy is the more enduring. And another video we're going to see here with some scholars from Yale Divinity School. I mean, Jeff would be so proud that I'm using something that they also make this point that whether we call it joy or happiness, but usually the Bible uses the word joy. The word happy is not hardly found in the Bible.
Happiness is an emotional response.
But actually, this is exactly where we're going now. You recognize that voice?
No.
That's Matthew McConaughey. And Matthew McConaughey, the actor, is going to get into this difference between joy and happiness. His view is joy is the more enduring, happiness is the more it comes and goes.
But the Bible talks about count it all joy is a chapter in a verse in the Bible, meaning regardless of what you go through, it might be painful, but when you look at the aspects of what the future holds on it, it might be like I lost my sister not long ago, and when I consider the circumstances that she was going through, and I tend to think not being there to be able to support her and the suffering she was going to go through, at the end of it, I see that count as joy because she's no longer suffering and everything is okay for her.
Yeah, Paul, I think is the author you're quoting, and Paul counted all of his difficulties, all of his opposition as worth nothing compared to the joy of the Lord. So that joy, that enduring joy, relationship, confidence, trust, hope, it is so much greater than the momentary challenge, that those challenges mean nothing. In fact, we'll just fold them into the joy and welcome them as worthy adversaries, but at the end of the day, they're defeated. So, yes.
I keep thinking, circumstances that are negative are outside of us. But joy is internal. So we can, no matter what happens, we can still hold on to whatever is internal.
Lovely. Lovely, Carol, thanks. Okay, Matthew McConaughey speaks.
To an outcome. If I win, I will be happy. If I don't, I won't. It's an if-then, cause and effect, quid pro quo, standard that we cannot sustain because we immediately raise it every time. Happiness is an emotional response to an outcome. If I win, I will be happy. If I don't, I won't. It's an if-then, cause and effect, quid pro quo, standard that we cannot sustain because we immediately raise it every time we attain it. You see, happiness demands a certain outcome. It is result reliant. And I say if happiness is what you're after, then you're going to be let down frequently and you're going to be unhappy much of your time. Joy, though, joy is a different thing. It's something else. Joy is not a choice. It's not a response to some result. It's a constant. Joy is the feeling that we have from doing what we are fashioned to do, no matter the outcome. Now, personally, as an actor, I started enjoying my work and literally being more happy when I stopped trying to make the daily labor a means to a certain end. For example, I need this film to be a box office success. You know, I need my performance to be acknowledged. I need the respect of my peers. All those are reasonable aspirations, but the truth is, as soon as the work, the daily making of the movie, the doing of the deed became the reward in itself for me, I got more box office, more accolades and respect than I ever had before. See, joy is always in process. It's under construction. It is in constant approach, alive and well in the doing of what we're fashioned to do and enjoying it. Now, the easiest way to dissect success is through gratitude. Giving thanks for that which we do have, for what is working. Appreciating the simple things we sometimes take for granted. We give thanks for these things, and that gratitude reciprocates, creating more to be thankful for. It's really simple, and it works. Now, I'm not saying be in denial of your failures. No, we can learn from them too, but only if we look at them constructively, as a means to reveal what we are good at, what we can get better at, what we do succeed at.
This is from a TED Talk. Right, good. When you go back to the YouTube page, you'll need to X out of that, exit the full screen. Pete's question is still a good one. Is this happiness we're talking about, or is it joy? The one that is under process, as Matthew McConaughey calls it. The one that is not result dependent, result reliant was his phrase. I first ran into this idea that actually happiness may be the more enduring term, joy may be the more fleeting, through Thich Nhat Hanh's writing. For Thich Nhat Hanh, the late Buddhist monk in Vietnam, his term is happy for the enduring peace. In the way that we say, I just want my kids to be happy. A sense of deep fulfillment, just being at ease, contentment with the world. Well, is that joy? Is it happiness? But pick your term. whether that's joy or happiness for you, but there is a distinction, I think, between that which is always there inside. The world can't take it away. The exteriors of the world cannot take it away. I'm always at peace. Whether you call that happiness or joy, take your pick. But then there's momentary delight, which reminds us these two things are not opposite or opposed. The momentary delight in the sunshine, in the child's laughter, in just being present in the moment, it reminds us that that enduring quality is always accessible through the moment, through the momentary experience of the here and now, whether it's the treats on the table, just the pleasant experience of being together here on the screen and in the room. That reminds us that that which is lasting and eternal is always there and it's accessible, even in the most difficult time. That is that joy, or perhaps it's happiness. That does not depend on whether it's raining or sunny outside. So to make a further, make that point even more, here are some Yale theologians. Just what everyone wants everyone to hear. You know, the internet led me to where it led me. So, this is that Jeff knows all these people here. So you want to exit the full screen, lower right. Lower right. Oh, and you want to share also. Oh, no, you are sharing, sorry. And that's the one, what's the difference? Yeah.
This simple 30-second method reverses memory loss for good. It's so easy you can do it from...
When I ask people, you know, what is joy to you, or how would you differentiate between joy and happiness? Some people don't, but many people do. And I think one of the differences they say is that joy goes deeper. One friend of mine said that happiness is an inch deep and a mile wide, whereas joy is a mile deep and a mile wide. And I like that.
There is a sense, this is a little bit radical, but there's a sense in which happiness has a self-centered element to it. That's true in our current notion of happiness in positive psychology or the self-help books, you know, 7 steps to personal happiness. And you think, all right, I want to be happy, I'm going to go read the book, I'm happy, right? It has a very individual focus.
Happiness in the general conversation tends to be seen as something more ephemeral.
I think, again, starting out on a general kind of common sense level, I tend to think of joy as something a little more intense. It's something that can bubble up and almost overwhelm one. Happiness, I tend to think of ordinarily as a sort of steady state, the whole picture rather than the emotional response of a moment.
Joy is a state as positive, as attractive, as all-consuming as happiness. But it's happiness transmuted into the context where an action of God, the presence of God, the grace of God, felt by the individual, the person opening herself to the presence of God, and the person sending back in praise and worship, gratitude and awareness of that relationship constitutes the life of joy.
I think that even happiness is something more substantive than that, and I personally would like to reclaim the word happiness. It's been taken over by the marketplace and consumer culture, but I think it's a venerable word, for example, in Christian theology and in Western philosophy, so I'm not averse to reclaiming it.
But then if we turn to the Bible, we don't get conversation about happiness. We do get lots of conversations about joy, and some of them map rather neatly onto our common sense notions of joy as a positive response to favorable circumstances. And they tend to be, you know, we will have joy when we dine with the Lord at the eschatological banquet, or the like. But then you have all of these paradoxical affirmations that you get in Paul and also in the fourth gospel. about joy, not in place of, but in spite of suffering, oppression, and various other things.
Gratitude involves celebration and suffering, much like joy does. I think that really helps differentiate it from happiness, which really doesn't involve those two elements. It might involve celebration, but certainly not the perception of suffering, the possibility that some sort of redemptive twist can occur in the face of something that is, on the face, seemingly very devastating.
One thing that video had in common with the Matthew McConaughey video was tying joy to gratitude. What do you think the relationship is between joy and gratitude?
I think it's very important.
Say more.
I think if you have gratitude, you have joy. It's ongoing, despite sorrows. It's a positive thing that can guide your life.
And joy, I've always thought of it as just coming from within. With gratitude, there has to be another, it's got to be a relationship, kind of a feeling. You're grateful for someone or something, and then I guess it's contagious as well, because showing your gratitude is going to make somebody else feel some joy. You should just grow in the community and beyond.
Does it one leads to the other, or do they mutually reinforce each other?
Oh, it's a wonderful dance.
Say more.
Well, to your point, they reinforce each other. For me, gratitude came first and joy afterwards as full-blown concepts. But they're intertwined, and when you practice one, the other one comes naturally.
That's what
Practice one, the other one comes naturally.
One thing I didn't understand, one of the gentlemen was saying was that gratitude is, if I understood it, connected with suffering.
With suffering? I'm not
Or
remembering.
that suffering was a part of that.
I think, was he referring to Paul again? Even through suffering, there may be the ability to find reasons for gratitude. What you have.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't have to say, I think they're in the same general category, but I don't see them connected. You can have gratitude without joy. And joy without gratitude seems to me pretty easily.
Oh. Contrary.
Now they're often together. Most often together. I don't see one having the flow from the other.
What does joy without gratitude or gratitude without joy, what does it look like?
Well, gratitude is a feeling you have, to me, toward other people. You can be joyful of yourself, but not be happy with your surroundings.
Could happiness be more related to pleasure? Pleasure involves physical involvement in a delightful thing. And I would think of pleasure in relation to the dimension of happiness, whereas joy is an undergirding condition in which, it's the concrete below the buildings.
The foundation.
Yeah.
Foundation for life itself.
If I think of the word pleasure, that relates to happiness, but less so to the idea of joy as I think of it.
The next video is conversation between Dr. Brene Brown. Brene, did I have the right name, right? Mm-hmm. Brown. Mm-hmm. She's at University of Houston, and an old Chicagoan you may recognize. Her first name begins with O. This is a completely different take on joy. To J.S.'s earlier point that joy may be the natural state of human beings or the intended state of human beings. But that raises the question, what gets in the way then of experiencing joy? Because a lot of us, that may be more aspirational than descriptive. Does everyone in this room and online always feel joy all the time?
That's a good question. Maybe we're just not.
So question then is, what are the obstacles to joy? Brene Brown here and Oprah talk about this with some surprising answers, but I think we could also add some of our own at the end of this clip. So this is from Oprah's show Soul Sunday. It's one of the things that people who don't go to church might spend their time doing on a Sunday morning, watching Brene Brown. What are some of the obstacles, according to Brene Brown anyway, obstacles to the experience of joy in our everyday living?
Fear.
Fear of? Loss of?
Joy.
Joy.
Yeah.
Beating, what did you say? Beating,
dress rehearsal of tragedy.
Yeah, forget the phrase.
Being vulnerable,
Right. Trying not to be vulnerable and thereby sort of eliminating the possibility of joy. Do you have that experience? It's like things are going really well right now, but the other shoe's about to drop.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have just talked yourself out of experiencing the joy of the moment by imagining the worst thing that could happen. That's what I got out of it. So what's her antidote? The practice of
gratitude.
Thankfulness for being in the present and knowing everything you have in relationships or situations that is, oh my goodness, how lucky I am. And I find myself doing that because I list, you can't help but list the things that aren't so good. And you sort of almost physically shove that away and say, oh yeah, but what I do have, it really is the power of positive thinking.
And Oprah says that it's a practice. It requires some discipline. And even Brene Brown here said she was BSing a little bit to herself, sitting in that airplane seat. I'm grateful, but I'm not really grateful. I'm grateful. I'm really worried I'm not going to make it to
taking yourself
Chicago.
in hand.
Would she still have been grateful? She was sitting there 3 hours later.
Maybe less so.
This is not easy.
I think part of what they're talking about is replacing those negative thoughts with positive thoughts of gratitude and just making that habit, continuing to remind yourself of replacing those negative thoughts. Actually, this is really great. This is fabulous. This is, I'm so grateful for this.
And even if you have to go looking for it, and in
Right.
fact, you should go looking for it.
Right.
Even if you make it up,
Yeah.
you're still sort of forcing yourself out of that negative thinking.
So at the
There's
end,
something there.
at the end of the video, Brene Brown says, you don't have to look very far for things to be grateful for that give you joy and remind you of the constancy of joy. Are these big things or little things, according to Brene Brown?
They don't need
Ordinary.
They can be ordinary.
The most ordinary. The most ordinary. And, as a pastor, I know what she says is true, that at the end of life or at a critical moment, where it could go either way for yourself or a loved one, you're not really reflecting too much on anything but those ordinary moments and how maybe you wish you had lived more fully in them, but how you would miss them so much if my life goes away or someone else, life or loved one is taken from me. The extraordinary and the ordinary it's always there, but it does take some practice. But don't wait until you're have that critical illness or your loved one's taken away, but live it in the here and now.
I'm glad you said that, because that reminded me of that other study we did about the importance of being in the now.
Right.
It seems like that's Another way of saying this, is that you focus on what you are now experiencing.
I think the whole spiritual life is living in the present moment, living fully in the present moment.
I think it's easy to say this, well, find the joy in the midst of sorrow or some difficult event. But I was thinking about Job, where there's one terrible event after the other. Was he feeling joy? Was he feeling gratitude? I think maybe that was the message. I don't know if it says it explicitly, but my guess is that's what Job was trying to convey.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, JS?
I was just thinking about gratitude. I did a short presentation in spiritual enrichment once on gratitude. And what I remember about the research I did is that it's hugely beneficial on virtually every facet of our well-being. It has physical benefits, emotional benefits, attitudinal benefits, societal benefits. It's massive. And to top it off, it's free.
It's massive and it's free. I think that's a quote from my refrigerator.
JS introduced me to this next video clip I'm going to share with you. But interestingly, just my own internet search took it to me yesterday. And I said, oh, this is the one that JS has used in the past. And maybe when you see it, you will notice it too. This is about building an environment, physical environment, that really allows us to be in that joyful state. It's a TED Talk by Ingrid Fattel Lee. She goes on, you can take a look at this yourself, just Google TED Talk Ingrid Fattel, F-E-T-E-L-L, Lee, L-E-E. She says she found an apartment outside of Tokyo, and this is some of the interior. She said, I don't know that I really want to live here because there's so much going on all the time. She said the floor also has a bounce to it as you walk. This is an example of it, and the outside of it also. I don't know if I can get back there without. Yeah, so that's the outside of this apartment in Japan.
God.
Yeah, would you like to live there? Okay, would you like to spend the night?
The one wonder what neighborhood restrictions apply.
Right. Well, you know,
We have a neighbor.
I was trying to say, there's a house right back here. I don't know if you ever noticed it. It's like this color.
Oh, the Lego house.
The Lego, it's called the Lego house.
Well, the neighbors.
Yeah.
We have a bright blue one that's both for us.
I'll I'm not trying to force the internet any more than it wants to go today. She does allude here to some of the reasons we don't allow ourselves to feel joy. It's not just because we live in a sometimes drab physical environment, but what is she referring to here? She says we're born joyful, and then we're born with curiosity, wonder, the ability to see joy and enter into it right away. What happens as we grow up?
Taught.
Sorry, Janice?
We get taught.
We get taught that.
Oh, my late husband and I had a joke about giving a child pens and pencils to draw with, and they go crazy and have wonderful time doodling. If you did the same thing to a 25-year-old, most of them would go, well, what am I supposed to draw? And what happens in between those two events is what we call art education.
It's called coloring in the lines.
Yeah, exactly.
Expectations from other people.
Yeah.
Following the
We-
rules.
I think a lot of us at some point begin perceiving the world primarily through our minds and our brains. And think that that's more important than just enjoying what's right before us in the here and now and entering into it with all ourselves, our sensation, our inner lives, our physical sense, our eyes, our ears, rather than processing everything through the logic of the brain. I'm not saying that logic, reason, intelligence are a bad thing, but they can sometimes, like Brene Brown was saying, raise possibilities, but like, what if? Like, well, how much did that cost? It could be taken away. All life isn't like this, rather than, wow, this is great.
So our dean likes to talk about left brain and right brain people in terms of, the static, narrow problem solving as opposed to the joyful artistic side. And you need both actually to accomplish it.
Yeah,
question is the balance.
Yeah, in Western society, the Enlightenment has maybe taught us a little bit to value the logical, the reasonable, the rational, and so on, over just the childlike, not childish, the childlike joy of living in here and now. The wonder and amazement in all.
Yeah, I would say, oh, sorry.
Please, Betsy.
Yeah, I would say almost everything about growing up in, not being a child in America, but growing up to become an older person, was geared toward, had some aspects of being geared toward taking away the joy. Even art education, and I did a lot of music education, but it was always so serious. The creativity was not honored. And honestly, religious education was the same way. It was all about get in line and be serious. You're allowed to think, but you're not really allowed to create joyfully. And by the way, you better wear something that fits in, or you're going to have other problems. So don't be creative with your fashion or your look, and on and on and on. Not to be so negative, but I think about this a lot, and I think that that's affected most of us. And yeah, I think about this a lot.
I think we tell people a lot, you can be anything you want to be in life.
Yeah.
Then when they are, we say, well, we didn't mean that.
Yeah.
And an answer to that, I remember very clearly, as she said this, an exhibit back in the 60s of a nun's beautiful artwork at Union Seminary, and her phrasings there, which concluded with, if you have not been creative, you have not really known joy.
Yeah.
Amen.
Well, Steve, there's no more fitting in. Oh, yeah, Betty, you get the last word, sister.
As being an elementary school art teacher for 30-some years, and having James kids and juniors, I always let them take their ideas and express them. And if they had trouble doing something, I would give them a tool that would work for what their idea was. I told my class one time that we had been to West Virginia, driven by a school. It was Thanksgiving time, and in the windows outside of the school were all these turkeys, and they all looked the same. And they said, that can't be. I got good for you. And they said, you can't take a whole bunch of people and have them come up with the same thing, because people have different ideas, different ways of doing it. I guess I more or less introduced different materials that they could use for whatever their idea was. If I was showing them something in clay, we were going to make a sculpture, I would demonstrate that I wouldn't make something that they would want to copy with an animal that might have an elephant's head and a duck's leg or something. So but I think we were in an unusual school because it was from what I here in Connecticut, and with progressive education and letting people express their own ideas. It just became a part of me.
Spiritual, educational opportunities that allow us to really enter into and express multiplicity, variety, diversity, plurality of life. Maybe gives us the permission that we need to really enjoy every moment.